Glitch actually started off with us just wanting to try something out, because if I look at that time, Channel V had just decided they're not going to play music anymore. We had a lot of fun doing the kind of content we were doing for them, and said, okay, where is all the fun stuff happening? Someone said, why don't you guys try something in digital? It was right after recession. But what we ended up doing was we just got out and started doing any work we could get, and from time to time pitching the kind of stuff which we wanted to do, right? So we would do promos for Disney DVDs. We've done like smaller edit pieces for someone's mobile content. Literally the two of us in the beginning, till eventually people started joining. We started hiring people and stuff like that. But we would keep pitching ideas which we thought would be interesting for someone to try out. And it was in that process that every single crucial thing that happened to us, I would say in the first 5-7 years, was that when a brand turned to us, like Unilever, I remember, turned to us and said, okay, you guys have been doing some great content for us. Can you also do the job of an agency, when they were launching Magnum ice creams in India, right? So we said, okay, yeah, we can be an agency too. So we became an agency overnight, because we thought, let's see how if we can pull it off. We took up a lot of projects without honestly looking at how we could do it. Sometimes we would pitch something, or rather in the pitch we would come up with an idea and come out and say, abhi karenge kaise? We once pitched a 3D AV way back in the day, and we came out and said, how are we going to do a 3D AV? And not 3D as in 3D animation, but you wear your glasses and it comes out to you in 3D. And we had 1 week to pull it off. So we figured some way to do it. It wasn't Avatar level 3D. It was still Chota Chetan, but we still managed something. But that worked. So I think we've constantly tried to experiment. We've never really said no to things unless we really didn't want to do it and we didn't see sense in it. So either business needs to make sense, or some sort of I would say creative payoff needs to happen. So we look at those two, and we've taken calls.
So today it's our 13th episode in continuity, and I'm more than happy to kind of welcome Varun Dugirala. So for all of you, let me introduce Varun. So Varun is the co-founder and content chief of The Glitch, one of India's largest creative agencies. He has a background in broadcast production for MTV and Channel V. Varun also hosts a podcast. So this is like a mentoring session for me. So Varun himself hosts a podcast called Advertising is Dead, where he discusses the challenges and disruption across advertising, media, and entertainment industry. So all those students, all those people all those aspiring media professionals who are going to watch this session today, watch this interview today, this is going to be a gold mine for you. Trust me. So before I add Varun, let me quote one line from him. So according to Varun, podcasting to me is my way to unplug from the world and plug into the warm conversation with some of the most interesting people on the world, in the world. My today's guest is a marketing and digital genius, somebody who understands the media and advertising industry inside out, and he's also a podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Varun Dugirala. Hi Varun, good evening and welcome to Cracking the Code.
Hi, and thanks for the lovely introduction.
Thank you so much. So how have you been doing? How's lockdown? How's lockdown? How's COVID treating you?
So I say that lockdown is this weird version of Big Boss we've all been living in, because at some point we initially we had tasks. The tasks were like bartan saaf karo. There was like that jadu karo. Then over time it's evolved to other things. But it's been interesting. I think there've been changes in the business that we're in, changes in how we are as consumers, as people. But I also think that beyond work, beyond everything else, it's also kind of evolved what we all really want. My big learning from the last 6 months is I want to see more open spaces. Sitting in Bombay inside an apartment for 6 months has taught me that I want to make sure I see more open spaces in life.
You are an engineer, and then you move to promoting something around the alcohol business, and then you eventually ended up learning PR. So can you quickly take us through that journey? Can you quickly give us more insights about your life, your education, your background, and then what are you up to currently? What are you doing currently right now?
So I'm actually come from a place called Kakinada. It's on the coast of Andhra Pradesh. I grew up there. Half my family is there, and while they're all extremely relaxed and chill people, I would say standard career path for most South Indian families. Half of my family are doctors, half of them are engineers. The doctors stayed in India, and engineers went to the US. So I wasn't very sure what I wanted to do. I like to code, so that's what I used to want to do. Ended up in engineering college in Bangalore. I studied in Bangalore for a couple of years, my 11th and 12th there, but did my engineering there. Hated it. And somewhere towards the
Mm-hmm.
end of my engineering, I started wanting to do other things for extra money and stuff like that for fun. I became promoter for Jack Daniel's whiskey for a few months. I did something for Smirnoff in between. This is all like very random things.
Right.
Ended up working in a call center after my engineering because I didn't want to work in an engineering job, and I did mechanical engineering,
Hmm.
which was not the most exciting thing in life to do, at least for me. So I
Right.
worked at a call center. I worked for AOL's cancellations department for over 3 to 4
Okay.
months, doing the 2 a.m. shift, 2 to 9 a.m. shift, and eventually ended up applying to and moved to Symbiosis in Pune, where obviously Masscom and media, everything else started. So from there on is when my MTV Channel V journey started. But I had that weird route to get to it.
Hmm. So, any exciting, like, how come you landed up getting into the PR thing, that spun off and all those things? I think that sounds pretty interesting. So, before we jump into the core story of Glitch and how you kind of entered into the media industry and things like that, let's chit chat about that a bit. Like, give us a perspective. What happened? What was happening back in those days?
So I always like to try things out. I think throughout my life and continuing even now, I always see something as, okay, this could be fun to do, this could be interesting to do, and I like to try it out. The Jack Daniels thing was generally a friend of mine said, one second we're going to work for 3 hours in a bar every day and get paid 1,000 rupees an hour. When you're in final year college, that's a great deal. What it
Yes.
also showed was the fact that you could meet every single bar promoter, you knew every single bouncer, guys who owned the bars, which means you had the right contact base, especially when you're in college. And
Super.
that was honestly my thing, right? But I think what that, as well as my call center days, really taught me is how to really talk to different kinds of people, and understand what solutions you can kind of give them in a very weird way in hindsight. Because I was talking to anybody who had an AOL internet connection who wanted to cancel, who would call in, we would try to retain them. Our department is called the retention division or the cancellation division. And so that's what I always tried stuff. Like I've had some, like, if I have to count the number of random things I've tried out, many have failed. I mean, me doing a podcast was a random thing because I never thought I would do it. But
Hmm.
I think that's the whole point. Right? What's the point if you don't try something out every year? मतलब एक दो chance तो लेने चाहिए.
Absolutely. I was reading online, and I saw that Glitch was initially supposed to be called as Jai Viru and Co. And
Yeah.
you had a deep love towards Sholay, and it was started by two guys, after leaving their corporate job. So tell us about your agency journey. How did it all started? And now, because as you say, you started as a video production company, then
Yeah.
web happened, then creative, and then technology, and you are now a full scale digital agency. So take us
Mm.
through that journey and
Yeah.
what you have been up to now.
So, to be honest, the fact that we were going to call it that showed that we had no idea what we were doing. The only reason we
Okay.
thought about it, because we were trying to come up, we spent 6 months trying to come up with a name. We spent, like, I think 1 month trying to figure out we karenge kya.
Hmm.
But if you look at, but the basic thing was we had a shoot where we had that bike, the iconic bike which had the thing on the side. And so me and Rohit sat on it. We took a photograph and said, "Arey, ye logo ban sakta hai." So that is
Hmm.
literally where we started off, and so thankfully didn't choose that because Rohit thankfully said, Ki, "Arey, but what if we have to work with international clients? They won't get the context." We said, "Fair enough.
Right.
Let's find an English name," which is why eventually the glitch happened. But Amit,
Hmm.
so glitch actually started off with us just wanting to try something out because
Hmm.
if I look at that time, Channel V had just decided they're not going to play music anymore. We had a lot of fun doing the kind of content we were doing for them and said, okay, where is all the fun stuff happening? Someone said, why don't you guys try something in digital? It was right after recession. But what
Hmm.
we ended up doing was we just got out and started doing any work we could get. And from time to time, pitching the kind of stuff which we wanted to do, right? So we would do promos for Disney DVDs. We've done like smaller edit pieces for someone's mobile content. Literally, the
Hmm.
two of us in the beginning till eventually, people started joining. We started hiring people and stuff like that. But we would keep pitching ideas which we thought would be interesting for someone to try out. And it was in that process that every single crucial thing that happened to us, I would say, in the first 5-7 years was that when a brand turned to us, like Unilever, I remember, turned to us and said, "Okay, you guys have been doing some great content for us. Can you also do the job of an agency?" When they were launching
Hmm.
Magnum ice creams in India, right? So we said, "Okay, yeah, we can be an agency too." So we became an agency overnight because we thought, let's see how if we can pull it off. We took up a lot of projects without honestly looking at how we could do it. Sometimes we would pitch something, and or rather in the pitch we would come up with an idea and come out and say abhi karenge kaise. We once pitched a 3D AV way back in the day, and we came out and said, how are we going to do a 3D AV? And not 3D as in 3D animation, but you wear your glasses and it comes out to you in 3D. And we had 1 week to pull it off. So we figured some way to do it. It wasn't Avatar level 3D. It was still Chota Chitan, but we still managed something. But that worked. So I think we've constantly tried to experiment. We've never really said no to things unless we really didn't want to do it and we didn't see sense in it. So either business needs to make sense or some sort of I would say creative payoff needs to happen. So we look at those two and we've taken calls. And over time, obviously, the agency matured. We got in people who had experience across the agency side, across multiple areas, and from two, we know about close to 400 people across 2 cities. But we honestly work with brands across the world. So I think that's really been our journey. Every year, we kind of think about, okay, what more are we going to do? What are we going to add? What are we going to take off the plate? And that's how we've always evolved.
Right. What is the fundamental difference between an agency and a production house, and how different is it from what you were doing initially to what you are up to now?
So it's an interesting question, because I think especially how things have gone with the entire industry, a lot of those things have merged, right? You will have production houses now who pitch creative and strategy. You will have agencies now who want to do production. I think in a sense, when you take a broader macro point of view, what you really get is the fact that there was always the strategy about what a brand should do, and you plan that out in the long term. You would have the immediate creative ideas, and then you would have the execution of it. And all those three, in many cases, will work separately. Initially, you club the strategy and the creative together, and execution was separate. Now everybody's trying to do everything. I'll be honest. Like it's not like you're going pitching against agencies and production houses. You're pitching against platforms, publishers, individuals. Everybody's going after the business because the business itself has merged together. So in my mind, a production house is someone who, I would say, it's about specialization. A production house specializes in the execution part. But in a sense, to be relevant today, you need to have understanding of the creative. You need to have understanding about how to kind of build out that concept, build out that entire functioning of it. And for the other side, the agency side, it's the opposite. You need to have very strong capabilities in strategy, creative, design, ideation. But you should also have a clear understanding of how execution happens. I mean, before it was okay to have just specialization and outsource all of the rest. Now you need to have that understanding. And I think the mistake many people made, especially a couple of till like I would say a year or two ago, and some still do, is that in-housing everything doesn't mean in-house everything. It means in-housing all the knowledge. You don't necessarily have to have everything internal in terms of the smallest pieces you don't necessarily have to keep in-house. That's a smart way to balance out the business.
Is it better to still stick to a niche and go deep into it, or do you think this is a great business model where people can kind of go really flat, do multiple things? And then having said that, do you think will it create more competition in the market, and then everybody will be trying to eat each other's pie?
See, everybody's anyway eating each other's pie. That's happening. But I think what you said is an interesting point, right? You need to have one or two core specialities that you bring to the table that differentiates you. When I talk about, and we were recently talking about this internally, right? As Glitch, what are the core things we bring to the table other people don't have? We bring a core ability to understand how to almost have brands kind of come on and tap into young people and their culture. I think we've been able to bring that alive, right? How do you de-age a brand? I know if you're working with an older brand, how do you make them suddenly relevant to someone who's young? How do you connect them to culture in that sense? But also on the execution side, well, that's what I was talking about is on the broader side. On the execution end, production and how to create as an understanding has always been part of our system. So we naturally know from idea to execution how to work. And we've also realized that understanding how brands can become publishers has been a core focus. So, I mean, I'm talking about us, right? But if the same way, if you go to someone like a Web Chutney, I know if you ask Gautam this question, he's going to talk about how for them working with tech startups and working with technology innovations with them is a core thing which he does. I mean, Chutney does a phenomenal job with that. So I think all of us have specific things we're very good at. The idea is not to become just generalists, but to say we have a few specialities, but we know how to do everything else also. So I think it's important. So you're a generalist who has one specialization in that sense is what the way for every agency to go. Yeah,
I think that's a great definition. How do you think things will be going ahead in terms of how COVID is going to affect the media and advertising industry?
So I feel that right now, and I'll talk about from a brand perspective, right? Brands right now want efficiency. They're saying, okay, I'm spending 1 rupee, that 1 rupee should deliver something to me. I think before they were open to spending some money for just broader, like, for people to know the brand, etc. I think everyone's focusing a lot more on sales, a lot more on business right now, because obviously everyone's taken a hit. And I don't see that changing too much. I think also brands have understood that doing certain things as digital first, doing certain things from an e-com perspective, from a direct to consumer perspective, has actually shown them great dividends. I was recently talking to the CMO of Epigamia, and he had an interesting point about Epigamia didn't have an online platform till I think April, May this year, to order it off their own website. And they were primarily focused on stores and people buy from stores. That has grown to become a substantial part of his business. So it also shows the fact that that they've all evolved to understand that something like yogurt, which you would never think you would buy online. Like I know I buy it online off their website. It's what I was telling him, that I'm a consistent purchaser over there. And I think that's an understanding. So everything around e-com, around sales of that sort is going to really grow. Digital content creation, and I say digital content creation, I mean stuff that you put out across to make people buy, to make people consume in a small way, smaller feature pieces, etc. That's going to scale up. So the cost of production hasn't gone down. I think the budgets on the brand production side have gone down. So if somebody would spend, let's say, a couple of crores on a television commercial even 6 months ago, they now want to spend half that, because they know for a fact that they will get better return on investment by spending that money on content they're creating for e-com or for sales or something like that. So you can do 50 pieces instead of doing 2. And that's been, I mean, it's not like people didn't know this before that, but I think the adoption has been far faster now. So some of those traditional forms of let's say ad films, etc., that's really going to be taking a hit. Same way how television shows took a hit in terms of budgets, right? There was a time when television had, if you go even like 5 years before, television would have your main GEC shows, and you'd have your niche channel with their shows. As soon as OTTs came in, you saw the niche channels budgets went down, and eventually they weren't doing as many shows. Whereas the GEC is obviously sustained because of the mass appeal. I think the same thing is going to happen here. You are going to see ad films, you won't not see that, but you will still see a cut down in budget, and you'll have a very different thought process in that mind. So that's how, I mean, in a broad sense, that's what I feel will be the perspective.
Okay, so then if we now look at analyze the situation right now, so what do you think is the future of marketing, advertising, and what are the hot and upcoming things in the marketing, advertising, creative space, especially?
I think anything and everything around e-commerce is here to stay. If you are an e-com creative specialist, if you're an e-com, I mean, if you from everything from platform building to managing that entire flow and pipeline, and that dam. So I think that's really one core area. Anybody focusing on it's great. Performance marketing has already seen a phenomenal rise. It's going to see even more growth over there, because these two tie in together really well. And I also feel a lot of brands are going to look at creating content which is not just for, how do I put it? It's not just a brand film. It is something that continues. I think, even if you look at the IPL, you'll see you've seen a lot of films come out, but for me, there is one that has stood out, which has been the film that Cred did, right? And I think because they looked at it as content and not necessarily as this. So I think that's really the places to look at, is the fact that if you have a publisher or a content first mindset, it's going to work really well. E-com, performance marketing, and interestingly, a lot of brands are going back to brand building and long-term strategy, which is because till now what I said is all new age, right? But I think they've all said, okay, one second, we were doing a lot of short burst stuff, but we also maybe need to take a step back and look at it long term, because a lot of changes have happened in the entire business landscape. So to be able to look ahead and say, these are focus steps we will take over the next year or the next couple of years to be able to get X and Y, is going to become more important for brands than ever. So brand building on one end, but performance, e-commerce, and content really is going to be the other end of it.
How much do you think the overall mindset of a brand manager and CMOs of big companies have changed? How significant is the shift, and how long term it is?
So I don't think there is I think the shift has been happening for a while now. and primarily because that as digital kind of came in and India adopted it the way it did. So India is a unique case, right? You can't compare India's growth in this space from how the West has, because if you look at something, a place like America, how did people get access to internet? They got internet access from, let's say, their desktops to laptops to, eventually smartphones. A huge part of our population got internet access straight from their phone. So as consumers, they're very different. So brands have reacted to that a lot faster in India, to be honest, than even if you look at brands in Asia. And because our growth in this space has been quite high, quite high in that sense. But the real change in brands mindset, I think technology is back in a strong way in everybody's minds. They look at how can technology make not just the process of how they manufacture, how they distribute, how they market, how they sell, how can it make that process a lot more efficient, a lot more seamless? How can you bring automation into the mix? There was this term sometime back, and initially when I heard it, people were like, "Arey, but this is just being cheap," was because a lot of brands said, "Why can't we reuse a lot of the content we'd already made?" Right. But if you look at it, it's smart because you actually shot a lot of stuff already. There are some things, if it's story-led, which you obviously find tougher to reuse. But if it's related to a specific product, and if you have modern, let's say, post-production or design skills and stuff like that available to you, you can very easily reuse those and repurpose, right? Don't just use the same thing. Just there is ways to evolve it. And so I think they've gotten smarter. They're not looking at everything as, okay, I've created something for now, khatam ho gaya, let's move to the next one. Everything you now create is almost, in a way, you're creating a bank for your future. And so I think technology is going to be a huge part, and not just in, tech was always like, oh, let's make a website, let's make an app and all that stuff. But I think the very process of how we, everything from how we look at data, how we analyze our consumer, how we even build our creative, everything's going to be very data and technology led. And I think that's the big shift, because it's been happening slowly, but the adoption has been it's been nuts. If you look at the last 6 months,
how this entire Jio thing has changed the kind of scenario, because when you say data, Jio has gone all into internet penetration, and now everybody has mobile phones. So mobile market has have grown hugely. We're consuming almost 50% of the population has access to internet now. We're almost second, third in number. So from the marketing, ad, branding point of view, how have done that this particular Jio
just
thing
think for it. Imagine pre having these kind of internet speeds if we had to go through this pandemic, right? Everything would have just come to a standstill. The fact that we were able to move in the span of a few months, I wouldn't say weeks, but I'd say months, of being able to work remotely, to be able to use, the fact is, if you had to do a meeting, and I'm talking about very basic things, but I think these have affected how we work. Very basic things of, okay, if you had to meet someone, you would have to book a flight, go there, meet them, take a flight back, maybe stay overnight, all that stuff. Now we just do we do it how we're doing it right now. And that has made stuff happen faster. There's obviously also overloaded people because you do so much more in a day than you ever did. But because you're moving faster, you are then asking every single aspect of what you do, which is, coming up with a creative, executing it, deploying it, analyzing how well it's done, using that data to build your next creative. That process has now become something which everybody wants to happen much faster. And the reason why a lot of us are struggling with it is because as human beings, we were used to a certain pace and flow. Now we're being asked to work at 4x that or 10x that speed. And the only answer for that is going to be the fact that in this process, what can we automate? What can we, what can we almost use tools to kind of make faster? And honestly, and that's where data is playing a huge role, because we're looking at every single piece of creative and saying, okay, we've made 4 things here. What's worked really well? Why has this worked? Who has this been targeted at? And you're evolving it as you go. And that's really because, there is this term that's used in marketing spaces, which is called cohort. Cohort is basically a group of individuals. You sort of, when this gender, this age group, this social background, you have a long list and you build cohorts. Generally, you would do 2 to 4 cohorts, right? Because you would building them up in a certain way. 2 to 4 was still 4 was still large. Now you're doing 16, 32 cohorts. Because you are using data and targeting people on digital in such a way that you're able to go so wide. The problem is, and this is where it's interesting, which is I think the future of the industry is going to be, is that you now have the ability to have 16 groups of people to target, but you then also need to have 16 variations of creatives to target them with.
Right.
And that's where technology will play a huge role, because the faster we can evolve to being able to do those, so almost build content at the speed of data. That's really where the opportunity lies, and it obviously is a switch of mindset, because obviously you have this visual, right, of an advertising creative who's sitting and thinking about an idea. You come up with a film, 2-3 महीने में
Right.
बनाया. Now you're talking minutes. You're not even talking hours, right? And then
Right.
that's really the
Absolutely, absolutely. So if you have to summarize all of this thing together, right? And if you have to give, let us say, core 3 piece of advice to any young guy looking to enter into this space, what's that advice, considering the current scenario?
I would say that, and this I'd said to a bunch of students, I think a couple of months back when I'd done a initiation session with them, I said that you need to know a little bit of everything and a lot more about one or two things. Like what I said about generalist and specialist, that is very important, because the expanse of what you can do in this industry has become far wider. But you need to have basic knowledge of everything. So it doesn't mean you need to learn all of that and join in, but be curious enough that wherever you do join, you spend your first 6 months to a year learning what every side of the business does. It's if you're in business, understand how creative works. If you're in creative, understand how planning works, how the new business guys work, how the data guys work. And I think that's very important. And also have a core specialty, because that's important, because specialists are the future, but generalists with specialists, well, the crossover is where it's at. The second thing is, look at data as being your best friend. It is your strongest ally, because the data can now, in a way, anything you want to do, anything you want to sell someone, anything you want to convince someone with, you can use. If you use data right, it's a great ally to use. So understand how data works, understand how you can kind of build both creative, insights, everything else from that. So that's two. Third is understand how creation works. And I use the word creation because we would always talk about production as a term as being something that was video led. But across the world now, production means that, are you producing a social post? Are you producing a GIF? Are you producing a meme? Are you producing a small piece of content? Are you a large film? Or are you doing something which is a long form series, or a website, or an app? So everything is production, right? So you need to understand how the creation process works. So get involved in a lot more projects. And it helped me a lot. My first 3 months in MTV, when I was interning with them, I worked on every single show they had in some capacity or the other. So I understood how every single format worked. And I think that's important. It gives you an insight into how every kind of thing happens. So those would be my 3 things. And the 4th thing is that be prepared for your world to change every 6 months. Because everything changes every 6 months. But which is why you need to always keep learning. So if you ever sit back, and we have this thing in our office, so if you ever sit back and you feel relaxed, okay, now everything's settled, thoda aaram kar sakte hain, that's the day you'll fall backwards. Right? That's literally what happened. I think by March, we were all like, okay, fine, this seems to be going well. Let's relax a little bit. And then COVID happened, and now we're back to like figuring it out from square one. So these would be my 4 points.
Fantastic. The strong focus about data, process, and these words, systems, analytics. Does your engineering degree or some sort of engineering experience helps you to be a better creative professional? Or how do you see this kind of combination? Because you did engineering, then you did some sort of a market research, and you did some gigs which gave you a lot of confidence and exposure. Then you're a creative professional, and I think I think the cherry on the top of the cake is that you are a great communicator. You host a podcast yourself, right? And we haven't even moved to that space yet. So I think, how does this combination, is it like a deadly combination? How does it work?
So I don't know what my engineering taught me, because I know for a fact that I'm a terrible engineer, right? So and so I don't think what I got out of engineering was any form of analytical knowledge. But at some point during my engineering, I decided that that's not what I wanted to do, so I think that learning really helped me, because it made me very clear about what I really wanted to focus on. But in general, each of these pieces that I've spoken about are just learnings, right? If you're curious enough at every stage to understand how everything works, like I have read most of the contracts that we get as Glitch for the last almost 10 years, primarily because at one point we couldn't afford a lawyer. Somebody had to look at contracts. but I slowly learned what it meant to look at a contract, and over time I've understood it better. So even after we handed it over, from time to time I'll pick up a clause and have a point of view on it, because it's important. And there's nothing wrong in learning newer things, and I enjoy learning newer things on a day-to-day basis, and that's really core to this. And I also enjoy process and structure. So one big learning for me, especially during COVID, and that's the way I'm looking at the world right now, is that while you can look at minute pieces and how short-term things are happening, the more macro and more broad you go in the way you look at things, the picture becomes a lot more clear. So and these are things which you are seeing moving on a long-term perspective. When I say long-term, I mean 6 months to a year. I think the world we're in, there's nothing more long-term than a year.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really that's the way I look at it. But I think every single experience you have in life teaches you something. My engineering taught me what I didn't want to do. My call center days taught me how to convince people in many ways, and so on and so forth. So I think that's really the way I look at it.
What are the skill sets you think are very important, critical, and must have for a aspiring media and advertising professional? How does having a degree help? Like, does it help or it does not help? Like, how do you analyze a degree in your life? How do you position it?
So I have a very interesting perspective on education, right? Because I've had issues with the Indian education system for the longest time, because I feel that it doesn't give you the opportunity to choose almost in a flexible way what you would really want to focus on. Like, I want to be a coder, but I couldn't do engineering by just wanting to code. I had to learn other things. So,
Right.
But I feel that having a degree helps in certain. I'll tell you how it helped me, and then for each person is different. I know people who got a lot of knowledge out of their degree, and that really helped them in their career ahead, because they really wanted to study. They really wanted to know those aspects. But
Right.
for me, at least, not the engineering part, but I would say what I did in Symbiosis with my mass comm degree, it gave me two things. It gave me an easy way to enter the industry. So okay, I'm studying Symbiosis. I have the basics in terms of understanding. I was able to get an internship at MTV. I was able to go back there for a job. It gave me that platform to be able to jump into that a little faster than it would have taken if I would have reached. It's not like I wouldn't have got it if I went there straight, but it would have been tougher. The second thing is that you also go into the industry with a set of people. So when you are a set of people who go into an industry together, like today, all of us who came to Bombay and across the world now to work in this space are in reasonably senior positions in multiple companies across the space. So from time to time, having that group of not just us, but our seniors and our juniors, and that network really helps. So that's what I got out of it. But I have friends who, for instance, what they learned in their graduate degrees or postgraduate degrees really taught them the basics for what they went on to do. So you need to be very clear about what you want out of your degree. Like, I've never enjoyed education. I enjoy it now in a very different way, but I never enjoyed the way education was. So I decided, okay, I'm going to use this as my stepping stone to getting to where I want to go. I will use this to make the right kind of network, and also thankfully have a group of friends I still hang out with till today. And that's what my thing. So it totally depends on what you want to do, and secondly, what you want to get out of it.
How internship is important for young kids again? How important or how critical is the role of internship according to you?
You will learn more in an internship than you will learn in many years of any form of formal education. But the only thing is, you need to go in with a mindset saying, I want to do everything and anything. If you're an intern who walks in and says, oh, I'm expecting someone to give me work to do, then you'll get the worst work. But
Right.
if you are that person who will eat everybody's head to make sure that you get to do as many things as possible, then there's so much you can learn. Like, I learned more in my 3 months internship at MTV than I don't think I've learned as much ever as I did in those 3 months, because I literally didn't leave office. I would walk up to every person who did every kind of show and said, what can I do for you? Can I help in any way? So I've done everything from carrying equipment to being a background person in a shoot, to just standing next to the director of photography and asking him really stupid questions. The point was that get as much experience out of an internship as you can, and choose that way. So if you choosing sometimes a larger company for an internship, but which has very set process flows, might give you less learning. It's sometimes great to choose a place to intern where you're allowed to do more, where you have the opportunity to do. But then also, when you're allowed to do more, nobody treats you like an intern. They treat you like someone who's, okay, you come here, so you have to do this. You are responsible for it. So you need to be prepared for that. So internships, it's fantastic.
So any concluding remarks about this particular section, because then we'll be moving on to talking about absolutely different thing, which is the world of podcasting.
The only thing I'd like to add here is the fact that now the space of brands is no longer it's no longer the picture of Mad Men that anybody would have imagined when watching the show. You need to know the fact that you should be prepared to get your fingers dirty in so many different kinds of things. Be open, and as long as you're open to that and you're open to embracing change on a day-to-day basis, it's the best place to work in. It's also the most chaotic and in many ways the most tiring. But if you enjoy some of those aspects of it and find a way to balance them, it's phenomenal.
Also, is there a way to kind of enhance your creative skill set? Like because this is a creative industry, right? Prima facie, it's a creative, and then you move on building other skills. So according to you, what is the best way to be creative or be more creative, or get into the creative space?
So I have a life hack. It's always worked for me. Is the fact that I'm not inherently a hardcore creative person. Right? I've now been able to come up with an idea on the fly. But I have always had very strong referencing. Is the fact that I consume so much that I have a bunch of stuff always saved aside, and I don't want to copy, but I have, okay, this is the kind of stuff people are doing, and I now do that across. I do that on the creative ideas front. I do about how people are running their businesses, how they structure businesses, how they structure services. So it's important to keep looking at what everybody else is doing and what is happening across the world, just so that at least have a point of reference. It then gives you stuff to fall back on, and eventually it makes you come up with stuff that's original, because no idea is anyway fully original. It have some frame of reference somewhere, and I think that's important. That's the way to kind of build it, is that the more you consume, the more ideas you get. But the only line is, don't blatantly copy. Take inspiration from a few aspects of everything is the only line I would draw there.
What's your thought on the Geo chat kind of a interface copying WhatsApp, and then Geo Zoom thing copying the Zoom?
So, to be honest, I mean, I think features and some of these things, I mean, obviously design would have been great for them to use other design aspects, but at the end of the day, it's an online platform, and I think functions and features. So if it's like stories was copied from Snapchat was what the point was. Now everybody forgets that. Right. You use stories on Instagram, that you forget that it's on Snap first. But I think, I mean, I honestly don't have a large point of view about it, as long as it's not infringing on some sort of copyright, which I think is the line. If it's, if everybody can see it, then I mean it's fine, and people don't care about it. I don't have a strong point of view about it. Let me put it that way.
Sure. And I think there's no end to the conversation around media and advertising. I think it's an ocean you can keep on swimming and going as far as you want.
Every single phone out there and saying, are they copies of each other? They're all just slabs of glass. So it's like it's like that. So that's literally my point.
Fantastic way to kind of end this. Okay, now moving on to altogether a different thing, which is the world of podcasting, right? I was curious to know from you, why podcasting, and how did it started? How did it happen? And what was your motivation of getting into podcasting?
So I have to totally give credit to Amit and Kavita from IBM for this, right? I was not a huge podcast listener. I've always been a consumer. I mean, I never even considered doing. I've dabbled in many things. I've dabbled in trying to develop a show for a friend who was pitching it to a platform for fun. I've tried to write. I have unsuccessfully tried to write about 10 to 12 books. I've never gone beyond chapter 1. So my eventual book will be a book of unfinished books. But I've tried. I always try. Yeah, that's like, I keep pitching that to people, saying eventually I'll do it. But what happened was that I actually a friend of mine from work. He's the chief content officer at Wavemaker. Karthik Nagarajan was kicking off his podcast called the Filter Coffee Podcast, and he needed someone to do a pilot with. So he said, "Will you come for the pilot? Pilots don't generally get used, but I mean, if you're okay, you can. Will you come?" And I said, "Of course." So I went to the studio, which is IBM studio, and I recorded the episode with him. And we just got talking, right? I generally like to understand how everything works. I was talking to the guys at
Right.
IBM, with Amit and Kavita, saying, okay, what's happening with this space? Because I'd listened to one or two podcasts, but not as much. I wasn't that much of a podcast listener, more a music listener in that sense. They called me back to be a guest on another show, which is happening live. And we got talking after that. And they said, okay, there aren't any podcasts in the advertising and marketing space. Would you be open to doing one? And I've always thought I have a weird voice, which wouldn't really work in audio. But it seemed to have worked for some sense. So we did a pilot. Pilot was terrible. We never used it. I learned a lot from that pilot, which I had Amit and Kavita on it, because what ended up happening was I only asked questions, but I didn't contribute enough. And I learned that, okay, this is a great way for me to contribute. And I think that's really where the excitement kind of came in. So once again, it's not just me interviewing people. I'm actually going to be talking a lot as well. And then I just took it as it goes. I'll be honest, the first 10, 15, 20 episodes, I'm sure a lot of people who are close to me are so used to me trying something, getting bored of it and not doing it after a couple of weeks or months. I think everyone's been surprised that I've done now, 96 episodes without
97, I think.
97 on next Tuesday, 96 done so far.
Okay.
And without a break. I've never taken a break. I might take a break after 100. I've been contemplating a break for a while, but I thought, let me finish 100 and then do a break. I have an interesting 100th episode coming up, so let's see. If basis reaction on that, I will see how that goes. But yeah, so that's how it happened. I've just taken it 25 episodes at a time. My first 25 was, let me see if I actually enjoy doing this. Second 25 was, okay, how do I evolve the kind of audience I have? Because I also started responding to a lot of people on social media, because people started following me and started sending me pointers about, people had issues. If you realize in this entire chat, I've said I think a lot of times. And I have this genuine problem. I say I think a lot. There was somebody who actually wrote in the Apple Podcast commenting, can you stop saying I think? And I've made a conscious effort over the last 2 years to reduce how much I say. Today I realized I was saying a lot of it, which is when I remembered it. And so they gave me feedback. They gave me suggestions of the kind of guests to get. I also realized I didn't have to stick to just people from the agency or brand space. So got people from outside that, got creators in. So when I hit 50 again, I was like, okay, what do I change now? And then we tried to evolve some of the formats, try to bring in different kinds of guests, change some parts of how I was doing it myself. Started looking at a lot more at the data. I think I started looking at data at 50. It changed how I looked at how I structure my conversations. I have this thing I learned that if I talk about a topic for more than 7 minutes in my episodes, my audience's attention drops. So at the back of my head, when I hit 5 to 6 minutes, I try to switch the topic. It has helped retain audiences longer. And now when it's going to hit 100, and I have a couple of other changes in mind for both the guests, the format, and that's how I kept myself excited about it. The beauty of podcast, it's a conversation. If it's not an interview, and the more you treat it like a conversation, the better. Which is why you should find guests who you can have conversations with. I've had guests, and I will not name them, with whom it wasn't a conversation. It become either me trying to talk more just because I know I had to contribute, but they wanted to just have a response and move ahead. So that also choosing the guest becomes very interesting in that sense.
Right, absolutely. So what's the podcast like? What's the process of you creating a podcast?
The way I look at it is the fact that, so I look at my guests in a certain set of ways, right? I try to look at saying, how do you make sure that you're not getting the same kind of conversation repeatedly week after week? So if I've gotten, let's say, an agency CEO this week, I might not get an agency CEO in for the next couple of months or month and a half at least. But keep some variations, so people also are surprised. They want to know. They're also expecting something different every time, a different kind of conversation. It's not similar. That's really important. I prep really badly for most of my episodes. I have like I spoke about Karthik earlier. I know Karthik generally has like 2 pages full of questions and clear-cut pointers written on. I literally have scribbles on my iPad with some 5 points I've written on like 10 minutes before the chat. So, but I like to keep it fluid. So I'll have very broad pointers. Thankfully, a lot of the guests also say, okay, a day before, can we just put some basic points down? So I just WhatsApp them a couple of points, and we go back and forth on some points of discussion, but never questions. I'll always go like, these are the broad points I want to discuss, and we'll keep it fluid. And I just talk to them, and in most cases, I've realized that if you make people comfortable, and if you feel that someone might not be that comfortable, you do a pre-chat. So I insist on sometimes having a pre-call instead of doing a direct interview episode, especially when I feel the guest is going to be someone who's not used to this as much, who's also going to be a little hesitant. Do a pre-conversation, just jam with them about what we could talk about, get them comfortable with the way we'll do it, and then do the recording, let's say a couple of days later. That really helps. I mean, that's been a great help, especially for us, for certain guests. For some who are used to it, you don't have to do any of that. You can just switch on and you will take off from where you go. And so I've let it be fluid. But for me, curating the guests has been, I think it's the toughest part of the job. It's finding the right kinds of people week on week, so you don't feel like you made a compromise. Sometimes you get lazy and you choose guess because you're like, when I mean, it's fine. Worst case, it'll be an average episode, and I'm guilty of that. I will never name who those guests are, but I'm guilty of that once in a while. I've done that, but I think that also then teaches you that once you've made a compromise, now you want to make up for it, so you need to try harder. But from time to time, also kind of look back and see what you could do as an extension. Like when we had. When June was Pride month and everybody was doing Pride related and LGBTQ related episodes, I said, what if I don't do an episode around that in June? But on the first week of July, I did an episode which was about, the conversation doesn't end in June.
Right.
What ahead? And it was a conversation about LGBTQ rights, about two categories of people who I feel are most misunderstood in this world. One is people who are LGBTQ, the other is the youth. So I had two guests on, both with perspectives on young people and people who are and queer. And I said, guys, let's talk about it. It became a discussion. So that was great. I mean, that was one of my favorite episodes of all time, because I think it was genuinely, everything came from the heart in that episode. And so yes, I just keep trying things, and the good part of the podcast is you always have another episode you can do the week after. So even if you have a terrible episode, and I've had some terrible episodes, you can always make up for it later. So, and also give it time. I don't think you hit your I think I'm finally hitting my stride over the last 3-4 months. I think till 3-4 months ago, I was still figuring out, what will happen to it. But now I'm okay. I know what I will do with this for the next 100. I'm quite clear in my head what to do with it. And I might change that in 20 episodes. But
fantastic.
And also doing it from home is much, much nicer. Because I think coordinating people's time is so much easier in this sense that it just makes life so much simpler.
Absolutely. So I would definitely want to go a little deeper into that, but I want to first also understand the podcast that you run. So one is, of course, called it Advertising is Dead, but you run another podcast called Useless Info. So first thing I would definitely want to pinpoint that I think these are very, very interesting names, but also why they have kind of a negative connotation to the names.
So I follow this this professor out of NYU called Scott Galloway. He runs a podcast called the Prof G Podcast. Is also another one called Pivot, and he runs a bunch of courses which I've done online and stuff. So he's been speaking about how the advertising and marketing, he calls it the advertising and marketing industrial complex, and how that is dead. And there's this whole conversation for the last decade about how advertising is dead, but the way I see it, it's been reframed. It's changed in the way it is. So when we had to come up with a name, it just came up, and it seemed like an interesting name. It makes people want to say, okay, what's going on with this show?
Of course.
But secondly, I think it also, for me, it means how is it being reinvented?
So do you plan the topic for Useless, or like is it's absolutely random? You just
I say, do you want to do a chat talking about anything and anything random? We'll switch on the mics and we'll talk about random stuff for about 45 minutes to an hour. And everybody said that sounds like a great idea. So everybody's been game to do it.
And then the flow automatically comes in.
Yeah. So and we let it flow as long as it needs to. So sometimes the chats have gone on so long that we're like, okay, 1 second, like at some point we'll have to stop. Like Rohan, I remember I did my first episode with Rohan, and we recorded it, and that one I was editing myself, which also took a bit of a thing on me because it was just becoming hectic. But and I realized that there were parts which I needed to kind of almost do inserts. So for the first time ever, I actually went back to him. So that point we didn't hit on that right. Can we just talk about that a little bit? And that's the only time I've ever done that. But after that, like Pooja Dhingra's episode, all of them, we just generally got in and just started talking. And then at some point, it's like sometimes you pick up a phone on someone and say, let's have a conversation. It was literally that.
So technically everything is content, right?
Yeah.
If you're talking sense, everything is content. That is how it works. So
Exactly.
suddenly the content thing has become like everybody wants to be into the
And also,
content space.
what is content is a very interesting term, right? A while back, this is one of my favorite stories. Is there was an app called Yo, which did it did well for a short period of time because it was an utterly stupid app. It was a messaging app where the only thing you can say was yo. You can't type anything. You can only say yo. But people downloaded, they're having fun. So you would make your friend download it. You would say yo, they would say yo. You could say maybe 2 yo's or 3 yo's, but you can only say yo. But that was content that people were going on that and genuinely having fun. So what might seem so stupid for me was generally like you didn't have to think about what you want to say. Also, there was only one option for you to say something. So I think that's really the right way to look at things.
Do you think is AI making, because convenience is on one part, but then do you think AI is making people stupid eventually?
So
or lazy?
There are two ways to look at it. It is definitely making us lazier for sure, but I don't know if that's a bad thing, because if you think about all the things in your life that you would rather automate or which you would rather let technology take over, would you really, as long as you don't let technology take over the things that really make you happy, that really drive you as an individual, drive your career, drive your life, as long as you don't give that up, or rather if you're not focusing on those all the and also the fact is that sometimes what you might focus on might become easily automatable, so that's a different conversation altogether. It's as simple as everybody did jadu through the first couple of months of lockdown, right? Nobody had a robo vacuum in their house. We had read about it and nobody even tried it. I was like, worst case it won't work, but I am buying it, so I bought it. We still use it, and even when we have an option for someone to kind of come in home, and I don't think we will ever need anybody except for we call him Ramlal, but anybody apart from Ramlal will not be needed. I mean, we might just upgrade him at some point of time, but I feel that there are things in your life which are mundane tasks, and I think over time, and I'm continuously I think now because I think it's stuck in my head.
Go ahead. Feel free, please. I have enough time. It's a very interesting conversation. Go ahead.
To automate those. But the true essence of what makes us human, as long as we don't give that up to AI, which is to come up to AI can't be creative in my mind in the true essence of how a human being can be creative. AI can't look at things from a broad-based point of view yet, the way we can. And as long as some of those, letting these things go to technology might open up our minds to spend that time on something else is the way I would look at it. But it is definitely making us lazier.
So coming back to the podcast part, how do you see the future of podcasting? How do you see the future going ahead? The rise of podcast creators, the rise of content creators. How do you see it going ahead?
So podcasts are a very interesting medium, primarily because they're one of the only passive content mediums. Every other piece of content, like even this, if someone's watching it right now, they're giving it its full attention, right? And then your eyes are focused, your ears are focused, everything's focused. A podcast, you can listen to it and you can do other things. And the more and more screen fatigue we are getting as human beings, the more and more we will veer towards passive mediums of consumption. So we'll have active time, we'll have passive time. And passive right now only has podcasts as a player. I can't think of any other player in that space, not that comes to mind. Also, podcasts let you imagine stuff, the way books do. So it's a great medium, and I can only see its scale because the cost of production isn't as high as video. Distribution is across. I do see it moving towards where the OTT model is. I know for a fact that there are platforms that are going to have exclusive podcasts. Spotify already does that. Saavn already does that. I'm not in the States, there's Luminary and all that stuff. So they're going to invest in this because investing in this is far lesser than investing in, let's say, in video content. So it is going to grow phenomenally. And as more and more, and like my understanding of the data behind it as a creator has evolved so much because I've gotten access to so much more. It's helping me look at my content differently. But it's not I think no piece of content is now going to be individual. So while I'm a podcast host, I also have to think about what I'm putting out on social. I also have to think about what content I might put up if I do a newsletter tomorrow, if I if I write a book day after, if I go talk to a bunch of people. So it's so Gary Vee has a great way to put it. Gary Vee says that you have one large piece of content you create, and then you take that large piece of content and you build it out into smaller pieces of content around.
Yes.
That's the right way to look at it. And
Yep.
I think podcast is a great core piece to have. I considered video for the longest time. I sometimes have video recordings, but I'm slowly moving away from that. I'm thinking, okay, what if I'm going to continue just keeping it audio, but I use that content in different ways. So if people are going to find interesting ways to use it, and podcast, this is just, especially in the Indian market, it's just the beginning. It is going to scale, because what we haven't tapped into enough using podcasts is actually education. Because human beings don't just learn by reading and watching, we also learn by listening. And there is going to be a disruptor in the education space who's going to put out modules through audio. You are going to be able to teach people techniques in their workplace, in all that stuff through it. I know I've learned a lot from a bunch of podcasts I listen to. I'm trying to understand venture capitalists. So I actually, a lot of VCs have podcasts, and I listen to that to understand how that space works. And so it's one of the most interesting spaces to look at, especially from an education point of view, if you ask me.
How do you analyze India's podcast consumer market? How do you think it's going to grow? How do you think it's growing going ahead? And also, what's your take on Joe Rogan?
A lot more regional, a lot more Indian languages already happening. That's definitely the future. Fiction is going to grow crazily. We're already seeing some great fiction podcasts, like Bhaskar Bose is phenomenal. I was telling Mantra this, that I loved the show because it just genuinely feels so interestingly produced. And so that's going to be a big form of growth. On the other end, I would say that the non-fiction side of it, which is what this is, you're going to see, while you'll have a lot of generic chat ones, but you'll have a lot of specialized conversation ones. I think the more specialized they get, either focused on business or entrepreneurship or finance. Like Paisa Vaisa is great at personal finance. It's a clear niche that he has, and I think that's really going to grow a lot as well, because people are also listening to it for that reason. So you're going to have almost like niche channels and GEC channels and regional channels, like the old television model. You're going to have that. But there are going to be a lot of players. I know for a fact Spotify, Saavn, Audible, all going to invest money into it. But you're going to have other players come in. You're going to have local, podcast companies like IBM, etc., who are going to scale up. So it's a very interesting time. It's a great time to be a creator, and it's also a very good time as a brand to understand how this works. Because there aren't enough brands trying stuff out in the space. Because the metrics are very different. You look at the numbers and they're still in thousands, right? They're not talking lakhs and millions and stuff. So, and my general response to every brand is that look at the amount of time people spend on it. So you will have a 10-minute video, you might have 1 million views, but if somebody's spending 60, 70, spending if a podcast has a 60 to 70% retention rate, but is a 1 hour long podcast, then think about those people are spending so much time listening to it. So you can go far deeper, and think of your integrations in that way. One of my favorite integrations is this podcast called Work Life, which talks about different aspects of how work and life, and which Adam Grant hosts. And each of his episodes focus on a certain area of how we work. And his sponsor, they take up a story from the sponsor's own company, which connects to the topic of the episode. So it's not just an ad; they're actually a part of the content, which makes it great branded content in that sense. I think that's really the future. So also, it's not that expensive. So I'm seeing a lot of interest coming in from brands. They're trying to understand the metrics, and as more and more, like we're going back data again, as more and more data is being available, and they're also warming up to it slightly. And on Joe Rogan, so I'm not a huge fan, I'll be honest. I listen to some of his episodes. I find it interesting. It's not necessarily my favorite podcast. It's not even would not even be in my top 10.
Do you think it's famous because it's almost on the air? The kind of people who come on the show have a lot of face value attached and already have a celebrity status. That's why it really... and of course, he has been consistent. He's almost done like 1,500 episodes, I think. So that's, of course, that we'll give the credit to him. But then do you think these are two important parameters as well in terms of the kind of content he creates and the kind of face value he brings in?
So The one thing you have to give him, whether you agree with him or you don't agree with him, is that he's willing to say what is on his mind, even if what is on his mind is the wrong thing. And it takes a level of, I mean, you can call it confidence, you can call it whatever else. I think all of us have filters. Like I never talk about politics on my podcast. I don't think I ever will talk about politics. I have many personal opinions about politics, but I will not put it out in the public domain. And I have many reasons for that. Some of them are obvious.
I think
some of them are.
This is increasingly happening in India nowadays.
Yeah, so I generally always stayed away from it because I'm like, it's not worth the. I mean, it's. I mean, in my head, I'm help manage a PNL. I have people who I'm responsible for. I'd rather not make a statement somewhere which becomes an issue for anybody.
Sure, absolutely.
And also, I think I'm okay to not have public opinions on it. But the fact that he can actually say what's on his mind, and it's not always right to say what's on your mind, but I think that's what attracts people to him. What also is interesting is his format is very interesting. It's so organic that you will suddenly have him pick up something from the internet in between.
I have now a few light-hearted questions that I want to speak with you on, and then we'll pick up the remaining questions from the audience, and then we'll wrap. What do you do when you're not working?
That's an interesting question. So I actually am generally consuming a lot of stuff. Off late, I have some stuff. I have a 3-year-old at home. Love spending time with her. She's consistently saying, "Can you stop working? Can we just like?" So that's definitely there. I enjoy working out. It's one of the things that drives me every day. So in fact, the 7 days or 6-7 days a week, I have something to do in the morning. I focus on that part. There are a bunch of smaller things I like to do. It can just be the fact that I spoke about the workout. I spoke about this. I like to read. So I pick up a few things, listen to about a couple of podcasts a day if I have the time. I keep it open-ended. I have a list of things. I'll have physical books. I'll have books on the Kindle. I'll have a magazine on the iPad. I will have videos I've bookmarked. I also listen to I have journalism articles I've kept aside. So there's enough options. And depending on that moment, I pick something.
But you're always learning, right? You're learning, consuming, and doing that stuff. Anything on the leisure side.
Recent thing, which has actually been quite good, especially during lockdown. I average still quite low. I do like about 5-10 minutes a day, but it's been great. I think, especially with the amount I consume and the amount that happens, that total switch off is great.
So what do you enjoy the most? You enjoy hosting people or being a guest on the podcast?
I enjoy conversations, to be honest. It doesn't, for me, I don't look at it as flip. It's easier to be a guest because I don't have to prepare anything. I just kind of come in when I am coming in. If you have the host and you have to think about, at the back of your head, think about how to direct the conversation. Okay, where do I take this? Let's look at the timer. If I'm the guest, I'm just talking. So guest is much simpler to do. But I genuinely I enjoy doing this because of I just like to have a conversation.
Fantastic. Your favorite podcast show? What kind of podcast do you like? Maybe you named so many of them. Maybe if you can, list them, name them once again for the audience, so that we also have a list of what podcasts maybe are your favorites and what you would like to recommend to people.
So about 2 to 3 actually, for very different reasons. I love Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, primarily because it is the most irreverent chat show you can ever get. It's just. It's like, he's just taken what he does on his talk show and brought it here. But it's just for you to learn how to have a random conversation, which I think is an art. The art of having a random conversation is actually, you will realize, is a lot tougher than to have a serious conversation. It's very easy to have a serious conversation. Sometimes to be utterly random for a long period of time becomes tougher. I listen to Pivot, which is Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. They talk about the entire Silicon Valley space, talk about business, talk about what's happening with all of that, and I like their take on where the world is kind of going.
What's your dream or aspiration? Something that you would do?
My aspiration is actually to be able to do work that's not just in India. Is to be global in what I do. To really experience more across cultures. That's something that's been on my mind a lot lately, especially as I've gotten to experience a lot more about stuff outside India, etc. That's really the thing. And also to have, so I'm a true believer in legacy. I would say that whatever you do, be it work, be it the podcast, be it with my daughter, it's about what you what do people remember you by? You might make money, you might do any of those things, but eventually how people remember you is what stays. I genuinely want to have that form of legacy, that people remember me for something that was good.
How do you see media going ahead? What's your take on media in 2025 or maybe 2050?
Over time, you're going to have a lot of pieces of content that will stick out and it will sustain, but you'll also be weeding out a lot of the content that is not going to be sustainable over the long term because of quality, because of the way consumers move and stuff like that. But more than anything else, as businesses, especially with modern businesses, they're not going to think, you while you have a local mindset, you are going to be global in your approach, because we are all doing stuff, going to do a lot more stuff off the internet, in so many aspects that we didn't do before, and that's only going to make the way we do things in so many parts of our businesses be truly global. So you could be a specialist for something sitting in Bombay, but you're doing it for, let's say, Sao Paulo tomorrow, and that's going to be a true reality for the future. So as long as you're able to do what you do really well, and have an understanding of the world as it is and understand the dynamics of that, it's a great time for you to be in the space.
If Varun has to start off now, what business would he tap in? It's a very interesting question.
I would do a content development company. I would not do a production company. I would literally do a company that just develops content. When I say content, it could be content around education, could be content around which would go as a podcast, content that could go onto an OTT. But I think the ability to develop is going to have far more value than the ability to produce, because you have enough distribution channels, you have enough production houses, but and you have enough developers as well. But to have a developer who's looking at it not from, okay, I want to make a show, but I want to just create stuff. When you asked earlier who's one of the people I look up to a lot, JJ Abrams, someone I really admire just for generally how he's scaled up Bad Robo and done so I've, in my mind, that is what I would do. But really, if I had the option, I would just not do anything, just do my podcast and sit on a beach before global warming hits us, and hopefully finish that book.
In order to keep on top of things within your profession, how do you continue to learn?
Honestly, the only answer I can say is just keep trying to find things to learn. Just follow the right people. You have the opportunity right now to follow people online. See what they're sharing. LinkedIn's a great place to learn. Follow the right kind of people on LinkedIn. From your profession, you also see what they're sharing, what they're posting. Learn from those pieces. I've actually learned from really connecting with a lot of, how do I put it? By connecting with a lot of people from across spaces online, and just trying to understand their businesses from them really helped me. And yeah, so just keep following people. It sounds creepy, but that's how we learn.
No, but in fact, that's a good advice. Yeah. The more you follow, you get different perspectives. And I think that's a great way to learn. So on this note, I'll kind of wrap today's episode. First of all, let me thank you for being on the show, Varun.
Thanks for having me.
It was such a delight to have you, and I think the kind of response and the kind of conversation we had backstage over the email, it was really smooth. So thank you so much, Varun.